Hello everyone, we're just getting set up, so just give me a minute here to get my stream going and be consistent. I'm having some horrible issues today with my internet, so I just want to make sure it's going properly before we get started. And if you could all help me out here, just because I'm working through Zoom to Facebook, there is a bit of a lag on Facebook. So if you're watching this on Facebook, I'm not ignoring your question if you do have a question. It's just that it's a little bit behind on Facebook. Also, definitely when you check into the conversation, give me a thumbs up or heart so that I can see that. And then that way I'll know that you're here. And seems like I'm still having some internet issues today. I'm going to hold on just a few moments here because I can't tell if I'm actually connected despite it saying that it is live. It is not showing me that. How is everybody today? Yes, I hope you're out enjoying the lovely weather. And it bodes well for the weekend, I think. All right. Well, I believe we're live, and you're probably all sitting here looking at me just ramble. So welcome to the Cochrane Coffee Chat, everyone. Today is March 14th, 2020, and I am Samantha of urbancasual.ca, a local Cochrane, Alberta events, resource, and community news website in Cochrane. Normally, we would be discussing the upcoming events of the May long weekend. But that is not really a thing this weekend, and something that really is up for discussion today is that it is actually the reopening of Cochrane businesses in phase 1. Living with COVID and the ever-evolving changes that we must continue to endure during this time. Today I have invited a local Cochraneite. His name is Nathan Klassen. He has lived in Cochrane for 5 years, and he has been actively involved in Cochrane's tech community, first with the Smart Cities bid on the national level, and secondly, as the ground laying efforts involved with the creation of the new innovation space that will be hopefully coming soon. His last decade, sorry, I'm a little bit flustered. His last decade has taken him through numerous industries. He has focused on organizational effectiveness and most recently landed as local tech company 4i's Director of Continuous Improvement. So I am going to admit Nathan into from the waiting room here so that you can all meet him, and hopefully my live will stop acting up here, but I'll let him in and we can welcome him to today's coffee chat. Here's Nathan, everyone. You there?
I'm here.
Well, good. I think we're here. It says we're live. I can see that people are maybe there, but I can't actually see the video. So we'll just assume everything is going. Okay. And yeah, welcome to today's edition of Cochrane Coffee Chat. Welcome. It's
thanks for having me.
You're welcome. It's good to have someone with your level of qualifications who deals with change on a regular basis. So you know, when I looked at all of the topics that we've brainstormed over these last couple of weeks, and there was one really common theme, and that common theme was the topic of change. And it doesn't seem like we're going to escape it anytime soon. Daily, things are changing, especially for many businesses who, you know, as recently as yesterday, they were all set to open. Now this is a Calgary thing. And then today they're not opening. So, you know, just in 24 hours there's been huge changes and from the day before. So as a director of continuous improvement, you know, I thought that maybe you had some stuff to tell us about change and how you, maybe we can start with how COVID has affected you personally, in both a professional way and personally. And then we can talk about how you come at this whole big topic of change from, a decade of work in just that exact thing.
Right on. Yeah, sure. So, yeah, good question on the how's COVID and the topic of real change in your life. How's that affected us as a family, as me personally. So this is probably a little bit of good context for talking about some of the actual insights that a person can use to help them navigate change, whether it was planned change or, in the case of COVID, to my knowledge, unplanned change for, I believe, all of us. So yeah, I guess on a change side of things for me professionally, a year ago, I actually made a career change, was with a very successful and an amazing company in Bison Transport, worked with them for 6 years, and then made a decision to leave that company and in a similar role, come and join a smaller high-tech sports technologies company here in Cochrane called Four Eyes Innovations. Joined an excellent team here as well. And for the last year or so, I've been actually working then on that leadership team. But a month and a half ago, we had to make some very challenging decisions as a leadership team on weathering COVID and the larger economic challenges that many companies are going through. And so we made the difficult decision to lay off a number of our staff. And in good conscience, because of the number of seats left on the bus, so to speak, to weather this COVID storm, in good conscience, couldn't put my own name on that list. So I took a layoff for March 31st as well. On that same day, March 31st, Milan actually also had been notified that she would be seeing a layoff from driving school bus here. Like everywhere, there aren't school buses needed when kids aren't needing to go to a school building. So both of us took layoffs end of March, and then 3 days before that, our house flooded completely and entirely. 3 floors of water in the span of 4 hours. Yeah, it just wreaked absolute havoc on our home. So just before our layoffs took effect, we basically got evicted from our home and had just started the homeschooling routine. Milan had just built a great homeschool protocol, and then the next week we were building it in a temporary accommodation again. And so we've been in this state now where I'm both looking for work and managing project managing a rebuild of our home, and then helping on the home front establish all of the routines like many of us are. So change is very familiar to us right now. And a lot of the training that I've done professionally and personally, I'm testing whether that stuff is just theory or if it actually holds water. And I'm going to stop using water jokes now because it's so, yeah, it's subconscious now. So I'll try not to use it again.
Well, you are still smiling, so there is that. Because, circumstances like COVID, and none of us have been through this before, but definitely that can cause huge strain on us and our relationships with our family, our boss, all those different types of relationships. Tara was on from Big Hill Haven last week, and she was telling us how they expect, the divorce rate to increase by up to 30% potentially. So that's like a good run at Stampede or something, right? Like that usually happens after a big event in our parts, but this time it's going to happen to us instead of, by us. And that can be really, unsettling for a lot of people. You get stressed out about not having a job, and you turn around and, you snip at your kids. So we're all kind of in that same place. So you are still smiling. You are a good soul, because after all of those things happening to you, nobody would blame you for just kind of losing the plot a little. That's a lot. That's an extreme go of change, I have to say. Like that's a pretty good example. I couldn't have come up with that all on my own.
Yeah, we couldn't have either, frankly. We definitely wouldn't have crafted this story the way it's played out.
Well, and like you said, Milan, she drives a school bus, so I'm feeling that stress. I'm not a teacher, so we're all feeling that being a teacher stress at home as well. So maybe what are some key strategies that we can all use through these times of stress that are, applicable, whether it's our personal life or in our professional lives? What are some things that we can do to kind of step out of that? Like I said, like I've got financial stress and now I'm taking it out on my kids. And how do we step out of that and approach it a bit?
Yeah, no, it's great. That's a critical question for us. And to say that we're not snipping at our kids or coming apart at the seams, for sure will not claim that. But in the midst of the emotional strain and the empty bucket, low capacity for friction or relational friction, marriage, whatever other relationships with the kids, etc. If you're a business owner and you're trying to figure out how to navigate getting back into, we're barely surviving and we're not sure what's happening. And now they're saying that we can actually go back to work and open our doors, but our staff are wondering what that means. And I don't know what that means. Like there's very little sense of familiarity to the next season of change. And so part of the training that I did and have done over the years is around organizational change and helping people at an individual level both receive change and then lead change. And I think that's one of the first keys that struck me in this journey too, is we may see ourselves as leaders, or we're the leaders of our household or the leaders of our school routine now with our kids, or you're a business leader, organizational leader. I think it's important for us as humans to recognize that we are first a recipient of change personally. We receive that change ourselves. We process it however we process it, and there's lots of different ways. And then we're responsible to lead others through that change. And so I think it's important to not depart too quickly from the first one in an effort to try and show that we're a strong leader, or that we've got it all together. I don't have it all together. I smile here and I smile lots, but that's not all I do, for sure. My kids have learned a few new words, I'm sure, vocabulary-wise, over the last 6 weeks at a minimum. But I think the most important thing, Sam, would be, first and foremost, it's empathy. It's self-compassion. When I don't have it all together and I think I should have it all together, self-compassion is the gateway for me to say, something's going on with me right now. I don't know why I just unloaded on my kids. I'm sorry to them. I'm working on it. And then self-compassion actually allows me to pause long enough to say, what is pushing my buttons? Because something obviously is, Milan and I, we joke a little bit that we often use the phrase, that was a disproportionate response to whatever was happening in the moment. And that's usually a good indicator to say, that's probably not what I'm actually bothered about. But then having self-compassion allows us to actually sit with that long enough, even in the discomfort of it, to start to unpack. And that's not even an easy process, but self-compassion is so critical, because we're going to fall off our own wagon so many times in this process. And the wagon, I think that's the second point I would say, is the wagon often is our lens, the lenses that we look through that define what we see as productivity, that we see as successful parenting, that we see as successful teaching when we're supposed to be teachers now and we weren't teachers before, or we are a teacher and now somebody else is acting as the primary teacher, and now what am I supposed to do? Like, everybody's being challenged in their definition of productivity. And I think self-compassion allows us to take a step back and say, we need to reflect on what productivity means right now. And even as a leader, what does it mean for me if I'm managing a team remotely? Empathy says my team's wrestling with what are they feeling is productivity for them, and what's my identity even wrapped up in productivity. This, we talked about the topic line of this chat being something like, change and the opportunity that change provides. When it's not change that you expected to receive or experience, that's often a great type of change, because it illuminates and pokes at all of the structures the mental structures that we've built. And that's not a bad thing. I think it's an excellent opportunity for us to see where we don't have congruence on what I think should be happening and what's actually happening. That's not something we necessarily have to run from. I think that's an invitation for us to lean into that, even in the discomfort of it. And so that topic of continuous improvement, it's a commitment to lean into discomfort and find the insight that's just behind that.
And then you're paired with being a good citizen of the world and doing your part too, right? So that's a bit conflicting too, because you want to do your part, but you don't really know what's going on, and it's always changing. So you can't really get a grip on it. I think kind of that loss of control is what makes people the most crazy. And it might not even have to do with the financial stress or the lack of a job. It's just that they don't have control. So you kind of seek out ways to get that sense of control to make yourself feel better. And probably one of those examples that I can think of that's most prevalent right now is on social media. And people have been, you know, passing around this idea of, especially now we're 8-9 weeks in. So if you haven't done it yet, it's probably, you missed your opportunity. But at the beginning, it was kind of like, you know, oh, I can sit down and do all those things I've ever wanted to do. I can organize this closet. I can take a new course. You know, all these things that I can be productive and do. And then on the other side of that, on the mental health side of that, there are some people who are like, well, I'm laying on the couch eating my feelings, and isn't that okay too? And it is, because we're all going through something that we can't process the same. You know, everybody goes through those emotions of change the same. And then on the same respect, now you're the person who's looking at all of those posts of productivity. Look at me go, I'm doing all the things. And you're the person that's not doing anything. And you start feeling like, how does, like, what is, where does our internal definition of productivity like play into our self-worth? And what are ways that we can cope with that? Because like I said, it becomes a mental health issue then, and it's caused by someone I have no control over and what they're doing. I'm just kind of passively watching them being productive. You know, we're all really good at saying we do lots of things, but whether we actually all do it or not is a different thing. But people don't know that other side too. So it can, on the other side of the spectrum, you know, it can make people feel less than. And how do we cope with that feeling in this time as well?
Yeah, I think the notion of productivity for me, for sure, you know, when I opted for the temporary layoff, you know, I'm still connected with Four Eyes and still engaging with the team where I can, you know, on LinkedIn, or just seeing, you know, checking in, how are things going, connecting with lots of other, you know, professional and social circles in my last month and a half too, which has been great. But what I find is I've been reflecting a lot on what, and actually I saw this in a Harvard Business Review, one of those little thought for the day things that you can get in your inbox. And it actually came out before COVID, but super timely. The insight that was in there talked about what are the critical habits or behaviors that I need to make sure that I protect and reinforce, in some ways almost at the expense of all others. So if I have, you know, however many 24 hours a day or however many waking hours, and I can spend this much on family or work or professional or learning, what piece of that day should I be protecting for a certain set of behaviors and patterns? And so for me, those things are their total health patterns. If I don't go and take some quiet time for myself once in a while, not even just randomly once in a while, regularly, and I recharge with new thoughts coming in, because my thoughts can send me down all kinds of rabbit holes. I'm less than, I don't have a job, I can't find work, or, you know, whatever the record player is, you know, the old LPs, we just leave them on there and they just run. And so taking time to get new water in, new flow in, to challenge those old thinking patterns. Physical fitness, Milan and I, we started doing the 6-week challenge at Spray Lakes Rec Center. 2 weeks in, obviously they closed the doors. And so we stayed on 5 mornings a week. We have TA, she runs us through the paces, and she kicks my butt every morning that we dial in. But it's those types of investments in yourself. When I think about leading and giving, if we're not leading ourselves first and serving our own needs, which maybe feels selfish at times, we need our own bucket to be full in order for us to then pour out to those around us. That's a paradigm shift for lots of us, and it was for me too. I'm thankful though, because now when I go out in the morning and have quiet time, or I read, or Milan and I go for a walk once in a while, because we need to stay connected, because our lives are going all over the place with new routines. It's those small investments, those habits, those are the critical things, I think, that help us be productive, frankly. Redefine what productivity is by having a solid personal footing so that we have something to offer outwardly.
So maybe if you aren't going back to work right away, this is a good opportunity to kind of step back and say, okay, for the time being, I'm still going to be, you know, in this position of, I don't know what's going on. What are the things that make me feel better? You mentioned exercise. I definitely attest to that. I know that on the days that, and get my butt into my basement and exercise, the world goes around much better for everyone. So definitely things like that. Eating, I don't think anybody's really got problems with that, but that's probably in the pre-COVID world, your stress would come out in the form of I'm hangry and not eating. We're probably not all in that lack of food issue these days, but it's definitely one of those things to step back and say, yes, when I get hungry, I get disagreeable and argumentative, and maybe I shouldn't go into a Zoom meeting with my boss when I'm hungry. But those are, I guess, like some tangible ways that these days too, like I talked about Zoom, but like we probably have to do some work on changing how we reach out to people, because like you said, we're all physically distancing. So now there's this whole other element of how I got along with my world that has also changed. Now I can't touch anybody, I can't hug anybody, I can't sit within 6 meters of anybody. So how does that affect me mentally, and like what do I do to change those feelings, that aren't about productivity, just in general with the way I felt before and how I felt my place was in the world before. How do we embrace that? We're getting a little bit down to the wire here, but just maybe as a last closing thing about how Cochranites can go into this next little wave, because I know definitely for me, now that more things are open, I'm even a little bit more trepidatious now than I was 2 weeks ago. And 2 weeks ago was probably the last time I was out. But I know now that people are going to be going back to things a little bit more. I'm going to be a little bit more anxious about this change than probably the change 8 weeks ago. Maybe you could speak to how we kind of crutch along in this next phase of reopening, where we've got to start opening ourselves a bit again from being all closed off. And
I think so maybe a couple quick thoughts in closing. One, just to reiterate the person first, so that self-compassion, empathy for yourself, empathy for others that are also managing change in their own way, that you're seeing in the grocery store, that there's stress there, you can feel that anxious energy. Empathy it's easy to get caught up in the energy, but empathy is a good way to distill that. If you're somebody though, like in an actual leadership role, if you're own a business or managing a business and trying to figure out what the next chapter looks like, you don't have to be perfect as a leader or as a business. Nobody knows this path. We're laying asphalt on the highway as we're driving. Like there's no highway already crafted for us on this. So you don't have to be perfect, personally or professionally. I think communication is going to be absolutely critical. It sounds, everybody says it, but I think actually communication, if you're the owner or the leader of the business or organization or family, frankly, and you're trying to navigate, okay, this is what I think we're going to do next, putting that out to the people that are going to be impacted by it, allowing that feedback, listening to what you're hearing back from them on what their anxieties or challenges or fears are, it allows for a common dialogue then to navigate together. Navigating together is kind of our new normal. And I think as much as we are able to communicate, but with empathy, I think that's at least a point of departure. There's tools and how do you manage change and support people and change technology, all those things. Those are all valid, tangible actions that organizations need to do. But I think starting with the community, start with the human layer, and you can figure out the systems and processes and tools. Those things can be provided. But starting at the human layer gives you that chance of success.
I agree, and I think that's really important right now in this next phase. We've kind of been in a fight or flight until now, and so now we're going to be brave and go back to what we were doing. So I think it really is just important, like you said, to think about change, what makes you feel good, what kind of routine and consistency do you need to feel good, or feel that control again. Because that's really what it is. You get anxious when you feel like you don't know what's going on. So in this time, I guess, just feeling that and exploring those feelings, because I think in the first 8 weeks, we really haven't had the time to explore that yet. Like we've just been kind of existing and waiting for the next thing, and listening to our health advisors and our premier and our prime minister, and they're going over the numbers and the data, but even they're they're doing their thing, and we've only have them to advise from. And then I think it is extra important that layer that you mentioned about empathy, And even Mayor Janung, he said it in his 1 p.m. thing, his update today. You know, he's been saying it every week, but stay kind, stay safe, and save lives. And I think now I kind of, you know, get that whole picture of what he's saying there. You know, you stay kind. So yeah, you're in the grocery store and you can see people are, you know, embrace it, tell someone, smile at someone, make the situation a little bit better. Just remember that everybody's kind of going through something, and we're all going through something together. And then the stay safe, you know, if we all follow the rules and do what we're supposed to, we'll all stay safe and we will save lives. But then we come back to this whole change thing, and it's not just a physical, we can't go do things. It's about how to get through this change mentally sound. Not wanting to kill all of our family members or some of them. You know, having a healthy community after all of this. So I think it's really important, like I said, especially now. So that's why it was kind of timely as we're going through the next change. And I really believe that this is the next change to where we're heading. And hopefully we can figure it all out and keep progressing, because I guess sometimes change involves not progressing, right? So we might have to revisit these questions again in the future. But maybe if we all take the time right now as you know, as our own personal selves, in our professional lives moving forward, to kind of discuss change with your family members, like you said, or your colleagues. If you're an employer, maybe this is the time to not be the boss and maybe embrace, you know, your staff and come up with solutions together, so that everyone, I think ultimately when you have that sense of control, you feel safe. And I think that's kind of what we're all striving or hoping to move towards. And I think that's kind of what I got a bit from Mayor Janung today too, when he was talking about just mostly like, you know, we want to keep moving forward and we want to all stay healthy and committed to our town. So that change, that idea of change is super important. And I guess we're the biggest experiment there is.
You got it. Yeah, act on what you can control. Try not to sweat what you can't, and try and stay present in the thick of it, for yourself and for others, frankly.
All right. And so if now, because you are this, you know, director of continuous improvement, can people reach out to you if they're a business owner in the community who's maybe struggling with some things? Can they have a chat with you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've got lots of tools, even some free tools that I found even today when I was online reflecting through the organization that I did my change management training through. Lots of organizations are quite open-handed generally, and especially now. So yeah, even if you want to throw my email address in to the notes on the event today, I'm happy to be a sounding board or to encourage, or frankly, even sounding board sometimes is just what a person needs to just kind of air out, okay, here's what I'm dealing with. Yeah, happy to offer what I can, for sure. And there's even a handful of tools that I came up with today that if people are organizational leaders, business owners, et cetera, that are looking for ways to try and help build their own capacity to help manage their people and their organizations through this next season and beyond, happy to engage with them and offer whatever tools I have here as well.
Great, Nathan. Well, thank you for joining us for our chat about Cochrane. And there was no coffee today, but it's a little late for that. I hope you get out and enjoy the weather while it is nice, albeit a little bit windy. And I wish that I could say that there was some things going on around town this weekend, but there isn't. So in the meantime, while we are reopened for business in phase 1, that does not mean that you can start hugging everybody. You still need to follow the rules of the store. In some cases, that might be a limitation on people in the store. You will still need to follow arrows and little fancy decals on the floor of each of the stores and the different locations. You shouldn't be having massive gatherings, and those things are all still things, so don't mess up that way. You know, we are still kind of under the restrictions that we were before. We are just going to try to embrace going back to the working world and expanding our COVID-19 limits. But don't forget that we still have to do our part and do all those physical distancing things so that this doesn't get worse ultimately. And so no changes there. but other changes that I would like you to think about, whether it's your personal life or you're a business owner embracing COVID-19 changes. But thank you, Nathan, for joining us. And thank you, Cochrane, for joining me for another edition of the Cochrane Coffee Chat. Bye.
Thanks so much, you guys. Take care.